Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Team Dynamics tip. And in today's session, we had a special session today for Team Dynamics, and it was really on the application of systems when it comes to running your real estate team. And one of the things, or at least one of the main points we wanted to make about what the systems will actually do within somebody's team is that they, number one, create efficiencies, right? And those efficiencies often lead to being more effective, right? The efficiency of the process so that you're not taking twice as much time doing something that could have been done in half the time, right? Freeing you up to higher use of your time.
Right.
Higher dollar productivity. The second was consistency, that replication of a process, right? And so often I think of that assembly line process, and sometimes we think the assembly line process means that we kind of lose that sense of personality, right? Relationship. When the truth is, what it does is it guarantees that whatever the process is that you're in the middle of, when it comes out the other end, it's the same for one client as it was for the other.
For everybody, yeah.
And the more people you add, right, to the team, the greater importance you have of developing that sense of consistency, right?
Yes.
And that then we get into the whole idea of systems creating the leverage,
Right.
because you can define who does what,
Right.
as long as you've got a systematic approach to that. And then ultimately, which I think is probably one of the most important things on any team, is that it ultimately creates accountability.
Right.
If you put a system into place, the system will help you hold yourself, the process, the team itself accountable for the outcome by being able to measure whatever that outcome is supposed to be.
Exactly.
So we have with us today Kim and Lester Deane, the Deane team. And we wanted to have just kind of a one-on-one conversation. And maybe the first thing I can ask you is just what part do you feel like the systems are playing in your team at this point? And how well do you think it's going?
Well, I think over the years we have narrowed down who's good at what. But I think we still need help in the area of settling on a system and keeping it there. And just, defining in a detailed way who does what, so that when an idea is generated, we know what our roles are.
Yeah, I think and it bears being said that when I came along, I saw a functioning system of things that Kim was already doing. And so, I learned and kind of adapted and integrated a lot of things that were already there. So a lot of the things, like, that was a blessing for me, that I didn't have to go through some of the what in the world do I do's in the first couple of years.
The learning curve.
Already, right, the learning curve, because I saw someone already doing the what in the world do I do's. So that was a basic baseline of where the systems began. And then on top, and then there becomes the integration of, Deane into the systems.
Right.
Because the problem with systems is not the problem. The dynamic,
Challenge.
dynamic with systems is that they have to fit. Right. And so
there's a buy-in, isn't there?
Yeah. So I guess one of the things, I'm a systems guy. I'm always building systems. Today I was building a system for putting together a webinar for us to do a thing that we're thinking about doing. And so I had to put it in my own kind of, the whole thing that she was doing a little bit, with, charismatically autonomous.
My brain on paper.
Exactly. It was, so all of that, I had to kind of be able to adapt it to a Deane brain. And so that is the process that right now is that amalgamation.
Yeah.
And it's more, I think it's more interesting because of the fact that we have a marriage team.
Which is a higher level in itself, that's for sure. Because you have to be able to go to bed at night and turn it off, right? Or sit down at dinner and turn it off. It's a big difference of making sure that you get that healthy balance between the two sides.
Yeah.
Well, going back to this thought about the teams, because we've drilled down really quick into specific applications of teams. And when we spread it out a little bit and go to the general nature of teams, some of the things that are necessary in order for there to be an infrastructure that you set your team on top of, how do you think that is going? Scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you are? Where are the strengths? Where are the things that you really see are still needing some fine tuning in order to put them into place, so that again, regardless of which one of you picks it up, you've made the agreement that this is the way that we do it. And you might apply your personalities to it, but the process is the same.
Right. Yeah, I think we're at like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say 5, only because there is an understanding of the things that need to be done, but I think we are weaker in putting them down into a on paper, like putting them down into an accountable format. That's the place where it's weaker. But when we talk about how did that go, what happened, did you do this? Well, there's no argument. Oh yeah. Should I have done that? I didn't even know. No, there's no argument about that. That is something that we know mentally should have happened, and that's the experience that they should have gotten. And if I miss it, or if she misses it, we each say, I missed the blah, blah, blah. But it's because it's in our brain and it's not necessarily in a standard operating procedure.
Right. Well, this is interesting because one of the things when I'm working with teams, there are times when I'll get that phone call from the team leader and they're frustrated that week. They're frustrated with something, and it's usually something that happened, a situation that came up with one of the team associates, and it didn't come out exactly the way that they wanted it to come out. Or maybe, we've done it 8 times this way. How come the 9th time it didn't? And after I've listened to whatever the dynamics are of that particular situation, when we get done with that, I'll ask them, okay, let me ask you a question. If you were to define what you just shared with me, was it the person or was it the process? Right? Which is exactly what you were just talking about. When you were assessing, oh, darn, I didn't do that today. Then the question is, was there a process in place that if we had followed it and we know what it is, we would have replicated the same thing we did last time? Or was it the person who chose not to use the process that's been in place? So are we lacking the process that guarantees the consistency, right? The accountability, the replication, or are we lacking a system and therefore we're getting frustrated with the person who couldn't follow the trail in order to make sure that whether it was one person or the other, the outcome was the same? That's an interesting thought. That's one of the main things that I see when we're talking about teams. Is it the person or the process? And everything in a team is in really need of a process. Whether that is, you were talking earlier, Kim, that you were talking about making a video, right? And what did you mention on that? You were talking about
I was saying
the
that
outcome of the video.
This week, we have a list of things that I'm going to do and a list of things that Deane's going to do. And in that list, I realized there's so many sub-lists with each thing. Like it was, make the farmer's market video, but I still need to write the script. I still need to, it still has to be edited. So it's not like I can just go and post it right now. I still have to create it. Even though I've compiled everything, there's still other things that have to be done. And that's the hardest thing sometimes for us is the idea is great. We can see the end result in our mind, but getting to that end result is so many things in between that we haven't yet defined.
Right, sure.
There you go.
Decisions we have to make.
Decisions we have to make. So like even with the webinar, I'm like, okay, you know, and I end up slowing him down because I'm like, just stop until I can come back to it because
Right.
because I want to.
The train's moving too fast.
Yeah, but I needed to really. There needed to be something. You're right. The train's moving too fast. There needed to be something where he knows, like you said, okay, she's gonna want to do this and this. This is her part. Let me go. Let me skip over and do this because so she can fill in this, and then that way we can
which is
come
nothing
back
more
together.
than a process.
Right.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And the question to you from me would be, what are the chances that once you finish that video, you're going to want to do another one? It may be a different topic, but you're going to want to do another one, correct?
Right.
And so if you have fine-tuned and put all the meat on the bones when it comes to the infrastructure of that specific process for completing a video, and if you know it goes from A to Z, and in it, you do these things, he does these things, and they follow procedure and they follow a path and an order, then you're moving through it without 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. You know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah,
right?
I think what's interesting is
That's
that
so good.
we're the like I said, I guess I'm more of the systems guy. Today, I was dealing with that exact thing. You know, I built a spreadsheet, and I was like,
There you go.
These tasks are really projects. So now let me break each of those tasks into discrete actions and put that on the spreadsheet, and on and on and on. But that takes time, and that's not dollar generating activity.
Well, let's talk about that thought. Remember we talked about earlier.
And then I come home, I'm like, what are you doing? And he's doing that. And I'm like, but we got to make the video.
Make money. Oh, yeah. But remember we were talking about earlier. We made the statement, measure twice.
Right.
Yeah. I know.
Once.
Cut once.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is hard. It's hard to sit down and go through a process to the nth degree.
Right.
In order to make sure that you've got that order set.
Right.
So that you can do it once, and then every time you come back, you don't have to measure twice. You already did that.
That's right.
Now it's a matter of moving into the process quicker, right?
Yeah.
So the measuring twice, doing the upfront hard work, really is the income producing activity.
Sure. Yeah.
Because once you've done it, the ability to replicate, which is what a system does, sets you up for now doing twice as much. 2 or 3 times as much, 4 times as much, because you're buying back the initial time and taking less and less time as you just plug into systems. And what's really interesting as well is there's even the layering of a systematic approach, because you've got this, which I love. You said, here's this list of things, and now each one of those have a sub list.
That's right.
And I need to put those in. And then each one of those have to be put into an order, which then in many cases is almost a mental and a physical time blocking.
That's right.
So that you know that once we start the process, this is how it runs. This is how it goes. And on the 4th point, you're pushing. And on the 5th point, he's pushing. And there's no stop the train because you're down on 7. And I got to take care of 4. Well, that's okay as long as 7 didn't slow down 4.
That's right.
But what if it did? Right?
Yeah.
And that is where, I mean, and this is not to harp on one thing, but I build dependencies. You're like, okay, this is dependent on that, so I can't do this before this is done.
If then what?
Right. So there's but I think what I'm getting from what you're saying that's valuable is 2 things. One, it is necessary to like rely on each other's strengths. Who does what?
Who does what
is important. And then it also doesn't pay to build a system for something you're going to do once.
Right.
Right. So if it's something that you're not going to ever do again, why are you going to put all that extra effort in to build a system to organize a thing that you'll never repeat?
And now we go to the bigger picture, which goes back to the general nature of systems, because the entry point for me, if I'm ever dealing with a team, is the initial entry point of a system is a business plan. Right? And that business plan is going to define the journey, right? Because you all can sit at lunch, dinner, in bed at night, whatever it happens to be, and discuss where you're going on your train. But what happens when there's 2 people that don't go home with you at night? What happens when there's 5 people on the team? They all want to understand it. When there's not if there's not a cog in the center of the wheel, when there's not this common denominator that defines who we are, what we're planning on accomplishing, and how we're getting there, that's the initial entry into a system that creates and defines the purpose and the plan, what we're going to do to get there, and then it can be broken down even further into accountability for what part they're going to play. Many, I call them micro versions of their portion of the contribution to that business plan. And the only reason I bring this up based on what you just said is when you were talking about doing something once, why would I build a system for doing it once? Well, rarely, if you are defining your business plan and then working off your business plan, will you ever do one thing once?
That's right.
What would possibly get that much time and attention if the intent was not to replicate it so that it contributes to the overall business plan that drives the sources, that drives the sales, that drives the paycheck. So that when I'm back here doing one thing and I'm fine-tuning it, every minute that I'm putting into it is worth it because it is not just driving that sale, it's driving all the sales
It'll come after it.
that I'm anticipating that source making as part of our business plan to ultimately get us to our maximum goal of income. Right? And if it doesn't, why am I doing it? That good, better, best. Is it really good? We can think, gosh, this is a good thing. It isn't a good thing if it's a distraction to the best thing.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
So if you're doing these videos and you're organizing that infrastructure and that process so that you can drive the success of that video and replicate it to 10, 15, 20 more, and out of those, you can see where you're going to get your 10 sales, then that initial systematic checklist was dramatically important to the replication, the efficiency, the accountability, the replication,
the leverage.
all of it drives the success of that one source.
Okay.
And so the one thing I think we could say about even the conversation we've had up to this point is that if you find yourself in a place where you're frustrated, if you're finding that you're kind of rubbing against the scenario, each other, the process, so often, 99% of the time, if we dig long enough, it's because a system and a process is missing.
Yeah, I was
agree.
When you said that earlier, I thought to myself, discretion is kind of the enemy of being able to do something in a duplicatable, consistent
Replication.
way, right? Because we're built differently, right? If we have a team of 12,
Yes.
all of us are built differently.
Yes.
And if I have a system that requires you to use your discretion, I don't know what you're going to come out with.
That's right.
But what I think you added, which was valuable, was when you're doing the business plan in the beginning, that's when the leaders build the discretion in.
That's a great point.
And then
That's a great
everything, everyone else after that just executes according to the plan, but the plan was built with the discretion.
Yes. And there's, we'd have to go to a totally different topic than where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, if we're hiring right, we have individuals that are aligned with our vision. They're excited about what you're excited about because that's why they joined you and you hired right.
Right.
Yes.
And now you don't need as much discretion because you're not worried that the choices that we'll make or that they will make about the process or the outcome will run in the face of who you are, what you do, and what you stand for. Right? So you're able to give them discretion. You're able to allow them to apply maybe personality, but they don't change the process.
In the brand.
Big difference. That's right. Because that's another great thing that we can make, the point that we can make. Brands are a product of replicating a process. Are they not?
Yeah, so
when
true.
you think about it, I mean, we can, whether somebody's a Starbucks fan or not, when you walk into a replicated process, the way that the place feels, the nature of the environment, the drink that they hand you, where they put it at the end of, where to go get it when you're done. Everything about that is a process that causes you to come back again because you are guaranteed a really good chance that your experience will be the same as it was last time. And guess what you're doing? You're aligning with who they are, how they perform. You like it enough to be part of it, and you return.
That's right.
That's what.
And no matter where you go, it's the same thing.
That's right. Doesn't matter if you go to California, to Texas, or New Jersey.
Yeah.
You're going to walk in and get the same process that delivers the same brand experience. And that's really, I love that thought. It's probably a great way for us to end this part of the conversation. We can honestly go on for another 2 days on systems, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what a great statement, Kim, that at the end of the day, we've said efficiencies. It creates efficiencies. It creates consistency. It creates leverage. It creates accountability. But it also creates a brand experience. By putting all these things into place, it creates the brand experience that's consistent. And then you can go hire 15 people to join your team. When you plug them in to your process, they all come out the same way on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you all want to throw out?
That's really good.
There?
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought about when you're talking about Starbucks is the fact that Starbucks hasn't always been the same. Like if you go into a Starbucks right now, they're doing a thing that's different than 10 years ago.
Right.
Right? And so that change is ubiquitous across all Starbuckses. And so that is kind of part of what, the point that I observed from what you're saying is that someone at some point in the central Starbucks world used some discretion and said, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. Let's do that now. And it's not done at the Starbucks level. It's done at the corporate level.
Right.
And then all of that that just filters out to the whole system.
Great point. They're trained to do it.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that you probably will find that their values, their core culture and values didn't change. The process did.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? They have fine-tuned the process. And that is a really great way of looking at any brand experience, which is a living, breathing experience. It's not in a box and can never, it lives and breathes. And you learn how to fine tune it in a way that it becomes better and better and stronger and stronger. How many times when we did our client events that the first thing we did was come back and say, how do we kick it up a notch next time? How do we make it better than it was before?
Right.
Our value systems didn't change. It was still all about our clients. There were priorities. We wanted them to know that whatever they came and did was going to be excellent. That part of the process didn't change. It was just the experience that we wanted to raise and elevate. And the systems that we put into place would do that.
Yeah. That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Well, is there anything else that was a great contribution. Anything else you want to throw out?
Well, when I reflect on us, I feel like there are times when we want to change in the middle of, midstream. And I think that's one of the the things that we have to be thoughtful of.
That's a great. That's another great
we'll
point.
have to go back to the business
we're
plan.
trying to be a little bit flexible and responding, but you're messing with the system and with the brand.
And there's your two choices. Are you messing with the system or are you messing with the brand? Because the brand is that consistent, that consistent experience that is founded in the passion or the purpose that you're putting into, the marketplace. The systematic approach to how you do that can be working, breathing, living, evolving on a regular basis.
I think the brand is palpable. Like it's not something you hold, but it is something you feel.
Yes, it is.
Right. And
it's an emotional reaction.
Yeah. And if you, for instance, if you walk into like Chick-fil-A and you get a rude employee that interacts with you, you think, did they hire right? Did somebody make a different decision? Like you immediately feel like, where am I? Am I at Chick-fil-A?
Because they are running in the face of their brand experience.
Right. And so I think when we kind of bump into that moment of making a shift and changing, sometimes it's the need of the business. We're like, okay, but we always have to say, okay, but what does the business plan say? Is this part of the business plan? Do we need to go back and is it part of like our core values? And so I think it really is like always having to go back to the business plan.
It really, and that is really another great way to wrap this up, because the business plan really is the cog in the center of the wheel. It is what tells you where you spend the time. It is what tells you what needs a systematic approach. It is what tells you what's supposed to be working and replicating itself. And when you find yourself outside of the realm of the business plan you've defined, then it's kind of like being out in left field and figuring out that maybe we're doing something. And if we're doing something that's not part of our business plan, then we got two choices: stop doing it, or define why it's not part of our business plan and plug it in appropriately, but not do what we call the flavor of the month, right? The flavor of the month being the distraction of the month that takes us off point. That's the systems that need to be put into place. How you do every source, how you approach every source, the structure for every source. If you're going to plan on open houses, do you have an open house checklist? Everything that needs to be done. And then, there's the overall checklist for different systems that you need in a team. And we'll go ahead and maybe put that up on the screen that just shows what we really need. But it comes to things like having a team business plan, having the checklists that are necessary, right? Having a CRM, having marketing programs. What's your marketing library going to be? Having a lead program that is either a lead generation, lead capture, lead nurture, lead conversion. Does that tie into your CRM? There are all kinds of things. Your project management you brought up. We put a project into place. Well, do we move it from just a thought into a project management software that gets defined in a way that every time we add a project, we know how the process goes. We plug it in, we figure out who is going to be involved in this particular project. We assign them appropriately. We make our checklists. We assign our deadlines. We lay it all out and we complete it. So that is another system. Do you have a project software platform that you can deal with?
And how to even know you're in project management. Like sometimes you're in it and you there wasn't something that flagged. Like, wait a minute, I should be. Then I turn and go this way because the system is this, and this.
Well, I have to tell you, I love you all for being here today. I could spend a day with you every week and have our conversations.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to end up with before we wrap up for today?
Thank you.
No, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here today, and I'm sure you will be back.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And we thank y'all for joining us today. Come back for another Team Dynamics tip.